I think we're going to keep rolling here. And maybe a question is, ponder what your experience is with after-dinner talks. Sometimes these are good, it's entertaining, you enjoy the evening. Sometimes they go on a little bit late and you'd like to get up and it's, you're tired and it's hard to focus and so on. So I think what we've decided to do essentially is put the after-dinner talk before dinner, when everyone's still alert, we're all in the room together, and then we'll have a little bit of reception. We can talk about the after-dinner talk and the discussion afterwards. So I think that's the theory behind what we're about to do. So now I'd like to introduce our after-dinner speaker, David Kelley. As founder of IDEO, he built a company that created the first mouse for Apple, many, many other things. I think if you look at the list of cool stuff that's been designed by IDEO, you recognize many, many things that not only you use every day, but you think are among the coolest things you use every day. So I won't list a lot of those things, but I mean, there are many, many. And David has earned many awards, recognizes his contributions, and I have a long list of those also. Perhaps just to mention one, a National Design Award in Product Design from the Smithsonian's Cooper Hewitt National Design Museum. As a Stanford professor, David Kelley also led the creation of the Hasso-Plattner Institute of Design, which is affectionately known as the D.school on campus. And over the last 12 months, the D.school's at Stanford effort has engaged students in envisioning the campus experience of the future. More broadly, the D.school provides university-wide inspiration for design thinking and also encourages faculty to find new ways of teaching. So here to share his thoughts, David Kelley.
Thanks, John. I'm not sure being between you and cocktail hour is a good deal for me, but we'll see what we can do. So thanks for inviting me today, but I'm afraid somebody made a mistake. You know, I think maybe there's lots of David Kelleys out there, right? So, you know, there's even one that's a movie star and has a famous movie star wife. This is a problem for me because in my little town of Woodside, California, they also live in that town. So when I go to a restaurant and I say, I'm here for my reservation, I'm David Kelley, they say, oh, it's you, right? Because they were expecting Michelle Pfeiffer, right? And so that's a problem. But although I'm a really big fan of all the online learning, I'm mostly a big fan of that it's got professors and everybody else off balance, and so it allows us now to interject new and exciting things into academia because everybody's just not quite sure what's going to happen next, and that makes it really great for the rest of us to innovate as well. But my real passion is what happens on campus. The online stuff is interesting to me, but my real passion is what happens face-to-face and in person. So as I was researching this for this talk today, I noticed that today is a national holiday. It's actually the National Day of Unplugging. So is this some kind of conspiracy, you know? But anyway, are the coincidence? I don't think so. Anyway, to get started, what I thought I'd do is I'd talk about the D.school. The D.school is what my colleagues are here, we call it a success disaster. It's exceeded our wildest dreams. And I do think that lots of the things that we're learning, it's our kind of longest running experiment. And lots of the things that we're learning, I think, apply also to online learning as well. And so let's talk about the D.school. So one of the most interesting things about the place is that it's an opt-in culture. I think this is really powerful. The students come there, they don't get any degrees. I don't pay the faculty. If you're a professor at Stanford, you want to teach at the D.school, you have to overload it or find a way to get your department to say it's okay. Half of the classes, we have about 26 classes a quarter, half of the classes are pop-ups, different kinds of formats, and the students don't even get credit for them. Having said that, we have about 4 times the number of students trying to sign up for every one of our classes than we can take. So something is going on there. Anyway, and the D.school also is really about multidisciplinary teams. So professors, a lot of them for the first time are discovering the joy of working with professors from other departments. All 7 schools at Stanford are represented in the faculty. And they come there and they teach classes and they bring students from their departments. And so we team teach in a way that, it's not like, one person gives a lecture and the next person gives a lecture, like everybody's standing out in front, fighting with each other, basically, right? The students love that. When the faculty gets in an argument in front of the students, that's huge learning, right? Except at one point, some young student raises their hand and says, "Who's doing the grading here?" They've been used to pleasing one person, like now they got a real problem. And so, my point is they have to learn for themselves. They have to decide for themselves what the answer is rather than trying to please the teacher. We look at everything as an experiment. And we try to figure out how far can we go, how radical, how extraordinary can we go out to the edges and get away with it. I don't mean break the rules. I mean, given all the constraints, we try to figure out how we can be more kind of radical than the kind of norm. And so much of the institutions that we deal with, that we look at, the norm is kind of inactivity. And so we have a point of view that we call a bias towards action. So there's not a lot of planning at the D.school. People just jump in and start things, and we experiment and we learn from them, and we just iterate. We just get better and better at whatever they do. So we kind of reward success, spectacular failure and spectacular success equally, and kind of try to punish inactivity. So I thought, we're totally inspired by what the students do. When you take students from different disciplines and you put them together and they figure out how to build on each other's ideas, it's really actually pretty straightforward to do this kind of routine innovation, because those kind, an opera singer and a physicist and a philosopher have never actually built on each other's ideas before. So by definition, you get to new places. And that's really what the D.school's about. And so we're very proud of a lot of the things that the students have done. Lots of great examples. And you've probably seen some of these, so I'm going to go through quickly, and then I'll tell you some stories of some of the newer projects that have happened. So Embrace, this is a rethinking of the incubator for babies. Instead of being in a hospital, it's delivered by physicians out into the bush. There's an ABC News special last year that televised this and said that hundreds of thousands of lives will be saved with these babies because they're able to maintain their birth weight. These are a bunch of students who had perfectly good jobs as lawyers and MBAs, and after they did this class called Extreme Affordability, they turned down those jobs in order to do this company called Embrace. There's Delight. Delight was a student group that was looking at water. When they got into India and Africa, they figured out that kerosene was a problem, and so they ended up doing a solar lantern. 30 million people today use their solar lanterns. This is a GE Medical example where one of the guys in our exec ed went in and found out that 80% of the patients, the children who had to use this scanner, had to be anesthetized, 80%. And by making it into an adventure, there's nothing here other than stickers on the machine, and making it to an adventure, only 5% of the time did they have to call an anesthesiologist. This is a huge increase. And then Pulse, this is a news aggregator. These are 2 shy computer science students who took a Launchpad, a D.school class, and spent most of their time in a coffee shop. They're not allowed in that coffee shop anymore, trying to figure out how people wanted to get their news. In the end of the 5th week, they put their product in the market. It became the world's best-selling iPad app. They got sued by the New York Times, and they got jobs at the San Jose Mercury News. Same week, big week for them. So now a more recent project, Liberation Technologies. This is Josh Cohen, that's third from the right there, who's a political science professor at Stanford. And with 2 other professors, they went to Nairobi, Africa, to look at how about fire prevention. You know, in this kind of, these like, they're sort of like favelas in Brazil. You know, the electricity isn't quite that sound, and they have a lot of fires. And so we were tasked with looking at fires. When they got there, the students realized that in interviewing the people, we believe in this kind of deep immersion. When they started interviewing, they realized that what they were really concerned about losing their documents, that the fire was one thing, but the main emotional thing that they had a problem with was losing their documents. And so these students made a company. They take a truck and computers, and they go around and they scan people's documents, and they put them up in the cloud, and it's just a real peace of mind for these people. This is a new student group. It's called Ravel. The company's called Ravel. They just raised a bunch of money, $9 million. And they, in the course of one of the D.school classes, they figured out that the way lawyers research cases is really antiquated. You type in the name of the case and you get this list, but it doesn't show any of the relationships, and it doesn't show it visually. And so they were able to do this, and it really looks like they're going to revolutionize the whole industry around how they do casework. And it also can apply to things like medical information as well. So this looks like it's going to be our next Pulse. By the way, Pulse, the news aggregator I just said, was just sold to LinkedIn for $90 million. So, you know, there is some economic benefit as well, but that's not our real goal. And this is the latest one that, that's come out. There's a real problem with clubfoot in developing world countries, and this group of students figured out how to make a product that was more like a toy than it was like a piece of medical equipment, because they really had problem mostly with adoption by the families. And this turned out to be easy to use, and the end result was that the adoption rate was quite different from ever before in this kind of thing. So one of the biggest wins in the D.school, and the biggest learning, which I think applies to all kinds of learning, has to do with the fact that we found that when we take these students and we put them in this situation, the end result that happens most often is that they gain what we're calling creative confidence. I just wrote a book with my brother, and this is not coincidentally the same title. Anyways, and what happens is that they go through this process, and they, somewhere along the way, they've opted out of thinking of themselves as creative. A lot of them have always thought of themselves as only analytical and not creative. And what we've done is just remove the blocks, and now they have this feeling in their bodies. And so, you know, I've been a professor for 35 years, and every year, although most of you that know that, you know, at graduation it's always fun, some student will bring his parents up to you and say, "Oh, Professor Kelley, I want you to meet my parents," you know, and you learn a lot. You know, the guy's like got a Grateful Dead T-shirt on and a ponytail, and you understand why the student is named Anemone for the first time. But now I literally have hundreds of students in my office in tears talking about how good it feels to be a creative person, to think of themselves as creative, right? And so this feeling that they have has come from our process, which we use this process called design thinking, and it's a very human process. We think that somewhat the key to the success of this way of doing things is that it's a very human process. So everybody's willing to adopt it, the professors and the students and everyone else. It's not some kind of methodology that's up for question in a lot of ways, because what you're really doing is going out into the world and trying to build empathy for different individuals. You know, what's their non-obvious latent needs? We call it need finding. We spend a lot of time in the university on problem solving, but I submit that need finding, try to figure out what problem is worth working on, is an equally creative act. And so by using our methodology, which is this human-centered thing, we identify these needs. So the big question is, lots of the learning comes from, okay, so we have this, you know, we have these classes and this method, and the end result is these students gain creative confidence. Creative confidence, by the way, if you're a psychologist, you know this guy, Albert Bandura. And Bandura's thing is self-efficacy. We think it is very much the same thing, creative confidence and self-efficacy. And Bandura's research shows that people that gain self-efficacy actually, kind of make better decisions, have more stick-to-itiveness, are more courageous in the face of failure. And basically, it's a kind of a change the world thing if you can get lots and lots of people to have self-efficacy. And so that's kind of what we're after, is doing that. But so how do you get there? In all this experiments that we've done at the D.school, how do you get there? And the answer is what Bandura calls guided mastery, which is that we take these students and we give them a series of small successes. We orchestrate a series of small successes. So we have it's an individual project, pretty straightforward. We hold their hands. We set the conditions such that they'll succeed. And then we make the problem a little harder, and we put them on teams, and they get better and better. And by the end, them and their teams all say, oh my God, I'm creative, The funny thing is, when they come in my office and start unloading about how good it feels to be a creative person, they always have an excuse. Like, I knew I was creative. My uncle's an architect. And I think, it's like they have to find some biological reason. And we actually know that I thought when we first started D.school, we were going to have to teach creativity. You don't have to. Everybody's wildly creative, right? All you have to do is to remove the blocks. They're there with this kind of fear of being judged by their peers. When we do an exec ed and we say, okay, we're going to start with improv. And then all the CEOs in the room say, they whip out their BlackBerries and say, I got to make a call. They try to get to the exits as fast as they can because they just can't. It's just too painful to think that they're going to embarrass themselves in front of others. And it's true throughout all of the activities that they have to do. So this work that we've done, I look at the work. If you look at Bandura's work, you saw my TED talk. I recently talked about how Bandura has this ability to kind of cure phobias, or a methodology that cures phobias, like with snakes, right? So he takes this guided mastery approach where he takes them through baby steps where he moves from fear to familiarity with the snake, and then you're cured. I look at our work as we have this problem that people have this fear of being judged, and we're just trying to remove that block in the same way that Bandura does with snakes. So that's really what's going on in this creative confidence movement is really making a difference as far as students' ability to take on new projects, and they change their majors, they do all kinds of things that affect their life because they seem to fit into their world somewhat better. And so we're very excited about that. But we have lots of experiments going on. As President Hennessy said, we're a kind of an experimental group. We just keep running experiments. We hope that we'll get a bunch of little brush fires going in different places, and then those brush fires will turn out to be a big deal, to be a movement. The most interesting project we've got going, which John Mitchell talked about, is this at Stanford class. So given all the interesting things that are happening online, as I said, it's kind of made everybody off balance, so it's a good time to sneak in with a little on-campus work. And so that's what we're doing. And so So this is a year-long project that we've been doing with the students. We're about halfway through. And what we're trying to do is paint a picture of possible futures. So there's lots of video work and there's lots of experimenting inside and outside of Stanford. We're working with all the stakeholders. There's lots of work with students and faculty and administrators, and we're working in different departments. We're doing a lot with Res Ed and with the overseas campus study. And so we're really trying to get to the point of trying to understand what could really be a great future for higher ed.
My future Stanford, share your vision for future Stanford, incorporate any, all, or no influences from the studio course, key projects, explore the vision that truly resonates with you. Right. I don't want a right answer or wrong answer or anything. I want David Henry Herman. All right. My future Stanford is.
My future Stanford is. My future at Stanford is a launchpad for my personal story.
I envision teams of students traveling the world and focusing first on personal growth and development. What I want to be able to do at Stanford is go to a faculty member and tell them what I really care about and what I really want to go out and do, and have someone to support me in that and give me the freedom to leave school and go do it. And if I fail, come back and restart and try something else, or even try again.
My future Stanford doesn't like the idea of very structured timing. You don't go from one class to another class and just shuffle in between. You really let your mind grow as much as you can in that class, and when you feel that you can leave, you leave, and then you move on to your next subject.
My future Stanford is a Stanford where relationships are key. The reason why we're here in this place, gathered, learning, exploring, adventuring, is so that we can build these meaningful relationships which in the future will inform and give meaning to so much of our purpose in life.
So I thought it'd be fun to show you. The students are coming up with lots of great ideas, and lots of. We did this with. We were working on K-12, and we did this with a bunch of high school kids or grade school kids, and we went in and we were kind of redesigning the experience of having lunch, and we asked them their ideas, and they had really a strong opinion that the solution to lunch in grade schools was ice cream all the time. Just like ice cream from the time we get there to the time we leave, and that would be perfect. You have to go a little deeper than that, and it's the same thing we're doing here. And so as we get to the teachers, we do it. And so I thought I'd talk about 3 different ideas. There's lots of them. We actually have flashcards. You saw them. They developed a lot of what if Stanford did this, or what if this. And I'm just going to give you 3 of the ones that I thought were interesting. So admissions, right? The students are looking at it, and they have a really interesting insight, which is, if you want a different output, you got to look at the input. So what we're doing in high schools is we're driving high schools to deliver the same students, basically. They have these high GRE or these high SAT scores and GRE scores, and they're like all interns at General Motors in the summer. Some of them are presidents of small countries and companies, and they're visiting. We've got this thing. We're driving them to sameness. And so how could we change admissions so that we could get the kind of students that we really wanted, or how could we drive admissions so that we could have them, have kind of the right kind of social emotional stuff in addition to the right academic stuff? And so this idea, one of the parts of this idea was, how about, no more admissions? That we'll proactively go out around the world, find the best students, tap them on the shoulder and say, hey, how'd you like to go to Stanford? Right? That would be different. We'll see how that goes. We'll see what that experiment turns into. And the other thing that we noticed, the students' insight, is that students come to Stanford in 2 predominantly dysfunctional flavors. One is that they already know what they want to do. At least they pretend they want to know what to do, but it's actually really driven by somebody else, like their parents, and they don't have a clue what they want to be. They're just overly focused on something. And then the other kind of group that comes, and they really don't even know what the choices are, right? So in this future scenario, what the students came up with is something they call the phase shift, right? And so in the phase shift, you get rid of freshman, sophomore, junior, senior, and you go to a system where students spend time in these kind of 3 phases, and then they go at their own speed. And when they're done with the phase, then we, as the faculty or whatever, agree that they're ready to go on to the next phase, and they go on to the next phase, right? And so they call the phases calibrate, accelerate, and activate. So if you look at calibrate, this is where they find their passion. This is where they learn what they were put on earth to do. It's lots and lots of short, intensive experiences, and they really figure out what it is that they really want to do. experientially, both on campus and off campus. And when they're ready to move on, they move on to the accelerate phase. In the accelerate phase, this is the longer, kind of full-time, intensive, period of mastering a subject. One of the things we really see is that it doesn't really matter what the subject is as an undergraduate. It's mostly about just having the experience of mastering something. The content may not be as important. This is the rigorous phase, and this is where they develop real expertise. And then when they're ready from that, and God knows how we can measure that, you move on to the activate phase. And in that, this is you continue to grow your expertise in the activate phase, but you kind of apply your learning in the kind of real world. That there's lots of different, we're kind of moving from the ed requirements to the experience requirements here. And they had one kind of interesting idea, which is, in the D.school classes, we realized that if we can force these Stanford students to fail, there's so much learning in that. But they're so protected against failing, and they've never failed in their lives before. So they had this idea called the Stanford Reserve Corps, where if you're a Stanford student, sometime during your time at Stanford, somebody's going to call and call you up as a reserve and ship you somewhere in the universe that that you're just going to be completely off balance and you're definitely going to fail, and that's going to be the real learning experience of your Stanford career. So they're calling that Stanford Reserve Corps. Anyway, those are the kind of 3 phases that they envision in this phase shift. And the last one is this. Lifetime loops. So the whole notion is pretty weird if you think about it, like this thing where you come to Stanford, you pay your money, and you got this intensive 4 years, and they're totally focused on graduating in 4 years, and they'll compromise their whole education to get through it in 4 years, and that kind of, it's all one slug, and then they're gone, and you kind of never see them again except at alumni functions. And so the concept here is that you pay your money to Stanford, and then you you join the club. You're a member of the Stanford Club. And there's like on-ramps and off-ramps, and you come back when you need to come back. You come back when you're, have some career pivot that you want to do. You come back to be inspired, but it's not so intensely all in one piece. And I think there's something there that kind of, instead of being a kind of a lifelong learner, if we could incorporate that into the deal we make with when they join. Instead of it's a time in your, Stanford is a time in your life, Stanford is known for spanning your entire lifetime and making a contribution through that. So it's idyllic, but I think there's some really interesting things you can do. So as far as this loop, I want to show you student work. So as a part of this looping idea, here's a video that one of the students made, and the student happens to be here, but that the student made. It was kind of like a 10 days of work. You had to come up with the need, develop the idea, and then make this video. You get a sense of kind of how excited these students are about this kind of work.
The path to higher education isn't really a path. It's a racetrack. Actually, it's several racetracks. And you're in the driver's seat, but are you really in control? Imagine if higher education was an open road, and you actually were the one driving. You were the one deciding where to turn, when to stop, and how fast you wanted to go, and you weren't required to commit to a long and expensive road trip that doesn't even guarantee you end up where you wanted to be. Instead, badges would demonstrate the education and experience miles you've racked up, rather than the time or money you've spent in a car. Now, on-off ramps would allow you to explore your interests, passions, and opportunities as they pop up in life. Imagine an open road to find yourself on. Maybe you can drive my car. Or maybe redefine yourself on. An open road you could cruise as many times as you wanted.
The long and winding road.
Or maybe just as many times as you needed.
You can go your own way.
The best part is, once you're accepted to this open road, it's yours to explore for as far and as long as you can drive. That's an all-access education, because a Stanford education shouldn't be a time in your life. It should be a lifetime.
Beep, 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 yeah. Beep, 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 beep.
So I want to close with an ask. While we're spending all this time on developing new content, new ways to deliver content, I think it's just as important to be concerned about the context that it's in, the social emotional stuff that's involved in our worlds and helping students become the best they can be. So I think we're all about designing an extraordinary online experience. I'm a big fan of this guy, John Mitchell over here. He's the most open-minded computer science professor I've ever met in my life. And we're working hard on it. When we're really, you saw from listening to the Chancellor and the President, you just see all the possible things that we can do. But we have to get out there and do these experiments and figure out how to offer them to the students. It's really a time of doing right now. It's unlike, I think, any other time that I've seen in higher ed. And so it's a time to do that. And then we're working on, and we think that just as important is the face-to-face on-campus experience. I think most of us inherently know that from our own experience, that was the exciting thing, that being on campus and learning from each other and making those kind of lifelong friendships and stuff is really important. So how do we make that an extraordinary experience, all in the service of really what we're all after is designing an extraordinary learning experience for all of our students. Thanks.
Laura Brown Cornell. I saw Learning Living up there, and I do see a lot of student-centered activities and learning, and a huge amount of integrative learning going on in your program. I'm interested in the living part of it, and I'm wondering if you have some examples or indications of how you're merging your goals and activities with the students' living on-campus residential experience.
Yeah, I'm not sure that I know, so I know exactly some of their best ideas, but they're certainly focused on it. The online learning people are in the classroom with us, and we're looking at different approaches to how that could be. You certainly the technology allows you to bring the professor into the dorm, right? And so I think there's a lot of hope for the online stuff to do that. A lot of our professors are resident fellows in the dorms, and they're trying to figure out what it is that could be done there. One of the things that if you could ask some of my colleagues who actually know what's actually going on, I don't. But it is funny how in watching some of the stuff it's completely different what you can do in a freshman dorm than what you can do in a senior dorm. And so all I can tell you is they value it, and they're working there to make sure that that's a part of the whole deal, because it's a big deal. So there's lots of examples, especially graduate students, where I'm not sure that the on-campus experience presently makes a lot of sense for them. They study in their dorm, they go down and take the test, and they go back to their dorm, and nothing really happens, right? And so how do you make that a community, a conversation point to do things they want to do?
Thank you. Hi, my name's Clark Kellogg. I teach design thinking here. I like your shirt.
Thanks. I'll tell you something. So I've been a professor 35 years. For the first 25 years, that was my role. I'm the design guy, right? So the time I'd see Hennessy and those kind of guys, I'd be down like, hey, where can I get shoes like that? Like that was my contribution to the university. It's nice that we're not at the kids' table anymore, and that the design thinking is.
So I do have a question for you, and that is, what is your current view of the capacity to do distance collaboration with real-time making and learning and experimenting and failing?
Yeah, I don't think we're doing it very well, but I think it's really an opportunity. We have classes with distance learning where we have teams on basically, they were talking about earlier was we train the faculty, and then the faculty run the project-based learning stuff at their location in Sweden or Germany or wherever they are, and then we do bring all of the students back for the final presentation to Palo Alto presently. But I think that the quality of the ability to Skype and stuff and the teleconferencing means that we can do lots of remote projects. So I'm really hopeful that that's the case, as long as you have enough touch there. I mean, it does require somebody, it does require mentoring right there. But the nice thing about it is that our alumni, both here and at the remote locations in these things, are so turned on by this that they're more than willing to come back and be coaches of the teams. And then you get a conversation going in that area. So in Potsdam, Germany, there's a lot of design thinking because there's all these people have decided that they're going to make it their thing, and so they draw people there, and then they make the pilgrimage to different places, not just to Stanford. So I think I'm really encouraged about collaborative projects. And the question is, where's the line of how much touch you actually need on that thing?
John Idelson. A question about how are you documenting the learning? I know Stanford's been talking about an extended transcript, but how do you record and document the evidence of what happens in the amazing experiences you do?
Not very well, is the answer to that. We have, so the lovely gentleman, Hasso Plattner, who gave me the money to form, the institute, by the way, is called the Hasso Plattner Institute of Design at Stanford. When we first started, we called it the D.school to make fun of the B.school, and it just stuck, right? Even though I kept getting notes about how you can't call this a school, David. There's only medicine law, it's not a school, and somehow it just stuck. So Hasso Plattner, the guy who gave us money, also gave us a slug of money to do research to monitor what we're doing. So we have lots of sort of research projects with papers being written about what works and what doesn't work and stuff. But it's not I'm not happy about it because it's kind of all design research, which is questionable. It's like so we have professors, real world-class research professors at the D.school all the time in all these different departments. So my dream is that they will at some point start putting what's happening to them there, whatever, because they're picking the subjects. The way a class gets started is our managing director, Sarah Stein-Greenberg's here, and 3 professors from different departments submit to her an idea for a class. So they could just as easily pick something that affects their research. We haven't seen it a lot yet. But that's the dream, is that we have this real multidisciplinary, extreme thing going on that has lots of research. Presently, you can look at the research that's being done by the design thinking community at Stanford. It could get a lot better.
Mitchell Stevens, Stanford. David, it's great to watch this project bear all the fruit that you're
This is the ed school guy who
starting to
understand this all.
Yeah, they call me the ed school guy. Ha ha. I want to pair what you said, your remarks, with something President Hennessy said, which is encouraging us all to think more about persistence and completion and how this new world can help us do that.
Yeah.
The great preponderance, and I'm thrilled by the inspirational message of people getting behind the wheel of their own cars and driving forward. That seems to me to be a highly privileged kind of academic subjectivity. The great preponderance of research that we have on college persistence and completion tells us over and over again that one of the primary reasons people fail to persist is because they are not given clear enough directions about what the road looks like, how the car works, which off-ramps they should not take, right? And I'm worried that this very empowering message that you have is predicated on an extraordinarily resource-rich context in which every off-ramp is also an on-ramp, right?
Yeah.
And there are airbags, on every side of the learner, and every failure that she experiences will be turned magically into a success.
Yeah.
That's not the world in which most young people live their lives. And so I'm wondering if you could just think a little bit more with us about how to have this optimistic way of thinking about college in ways that are kind of more realistic for the resource poverty of most colleges and universities at this moment.
Yeah, no, I think it's true. But I also think that we have we're not that great at outreach to other universities yet. Hopefully we'll get there. We have a program called D.Global, but we do outreach to K-12. So my real only experience is in areas in K-12 where there's just not the resources, and so we don't really want to give up our, paint an extraordinary picture of how life could be, but we have to do it in a way that's actually possible, as you say. So the thing that seems to work, regardless of the price, is in order to get people to complete is to have real empathy for the students and find out in that particular location what those students value, what's important to them. So there's a school in Philadelphia. The kids, we determined the kids are totally turned on by like solar cars and stuff like that. So once we can, it didn't take a lot of money, but once we had a project-based experience where it was talking to them, and we said you have to have a C average in order to be on the solar car team, then everybody's grades went up, right? So it's about it's still about inspiring them, in my opinion, regardless of it. But you have to do it in a different way. But I think that I don't want to give up on any group of students without thinking that we let them break the rules a little bit and they can be extraordinary.